Welcome to another episode of Inside the Recording Studio. I am Jody Whitesides, and with me is Mr. Chris Hellstrom. How are you today, Chris?
Doing very well, Jody. How are you doing? Have you raced out and bought that James Tyler guitar yet?
No, I have not. As much as I'd like to, I have not.
I'm right there with you. It's a little bit outside of my budget at the moment, but it would sure be nice to have one, wouldn't it?
Mm-hmm. I don't disagree. What are we talking about today?
I've had this thought for a minute. It's the idea of we're searching for all these like quick automatic fixes to anything that we have.
Right.
And it seems like a lot of people are unwilling to put in the work to learn something or how to do something, and instead having this mindset of like, hey, there should be a plugin for that.
Right.
It might be interesting to talk about the importance of air quotes like old techniques and how to actually go about doing something. And at the same time, looking forward to newer techniques and what we should adapt and adopt in our workflow that might help us or essentially stay current, while at the same time having a foot in the past where we know how to do all of these things.
Okay.
It might be of interest to some people that are sort of struggling with that are like, well, what should I do? And do I have to do this? Or perhaps even get somebody off their ass a little bit about learning how to actually do something as opposed to go preset surfing or whatever.
So going the Malcolm Gladwell route and putting in the 10,000 hours, so to speak?
Yeah, because I don't think there's a substitute for that.
No, generally there isn't.
Our own impatience can get the best of us sometimes and kind of ruin it for ourselves. I know I've been there. I think most people have been there.
Sure.
There's no substitute for time and doing. So to kind of kick us off here, this is something that is a pet peeve of both of us.
It's not just us. I see it on social media all the time.
Yeah, it's funny because we were actually talking about this just the other day, you and I. The question I put down here was like, is terminology still important?
It sure depends on who you're working with, whether or not it is. That's for sure.
Yes. It's not like language and things doesn't evolve and change. But when it comes to certain things that are affecting an entire industry, I think it's important to have definitions mean the same thing to everybody. The first most glaring thing that we talk about and we hear all the time is people confusing stems and multitracks.
Oh, yeah. Even just the other day, I think I brought up a thread posting to you about this in terms of questioning certain things of DAWs that can and can't do certain things. The impetus behind this was another guy who is a mixing engineer who was off his nut about the whole thing of stems and multitracks. He's like, stop calling individual tracks stems.
Yes, I'm wholeheartedly in agreement with that person, whoever it may be.
Yes. And I commented on there, good luck with this, because people generally will think you're an old curmudgeon for saying such things. And then I said, don't even get me started on the concept of the term producer. And he responded to that going, yeah, don't even go there because that's also really ridiculously out of whack as well.
Yeah, that one I would kind of defend a little bit more. But let's go back to the stem and multitrack thing for just a second.
Okay.
People obviously refer to stems as the multitracks. I don't know where that came from. I know there's a DAW that was first by calling it that, and that was Studio One. When you're exporting the multitracks, actually, I believe it calls it export stems.
Well, I'm going to call out Apple for doing the same garbage. If you do a Command E, which is the export tracks that are selected type thing.
In Logic.
In Logic, yes.
Yeah.
If you ask Logic to create the folder, if I am not mistaken, it names that folder stems. That's also Apple perpetuating this bullshit concept that is incorrect.
Right. Somebody that hasn't worked with either production music in libraries or
film
and TV or whatever, if you're unfamiliar that stems is actually a group of tracks, it's like all the percussion tracks, it's all the strings, it's all the whatever.
Mm-hmm.
That's what they want, because they don't want to deal with 150 tracks when they're mixing audio.
Exactly.
Because they got enough on their plate. So that's where it really comes from. I remember Bob Clearmountain actually did something probably about a year ago from this taping, where he said, stop calling it stems. If Bob Clearmountain says that, it's a problem, right?
Sure.
Because that means that somebody in his position deals with this as well. So yes, terminology is really important because we need to have clear communication.
Mm-hmm.
I've had a case where I was going to get a multi-track session from somebody from that had used a different DAW. And I talked to the engineer and I said, I want the tracks. And he goes, you want the stems? I said, no, I don't want the stems. I want the multi-tracks. He didn't understand what I was saying. So I ended up getting the whole thing in a session file format that I couldn't open.
Right.
So it matters, people. It matters. But before we firmly place ourselves in the old curmudgeon side of things here, you mentioned producer.
Yes. It's a pet peeve of mine, because the standard concept of what a producer job is, and this is similar across film as it was to music and still is, people are mutating this term in modern parlance, so to speak. The producer's job is the grand overview of everything. It's their job to find the artist, the musicians if they need it, or the band, additional musicians if they need it, to find the recording studio, to oversee the recording process, to hire the engineer, to hire the mixing engineer. And when I say engineer from the studio, I'm talking recording engineer, which is different from a mixing engineer or an editing engineer or a mastering engineer. The producer oversees all of that. Plus, the producer sits in on sessions to oversee how the recording's going, how the camaraderie or the communication is happening between the recording engineer and the artist and or band in the session, and does the same when it goes from step to step to step. It's the producer's job to oversee the entire process from front to back and be the liaison between all the pieces. That's the traditional term for a producer, and it's exactly the same in film.
I'm with you. I think this is something that we hear a lot today, where somebody that writes music at home, or they're a beat maker, they will call themselves a producer, presumably because they're producing music, they're making music. I have less of a problem with this, but the stickler in me is bothered by it, because calling yourself a beat maker is not putting yourself down, certainly not in my eyes.
No, because people that are good at it are damn good beat makers.
So my point when it comes to calling yourself a beat maker is just be that. That's fine. Don't think that you have to be this, oh, I'm a producer, to sort of glorify something that you may or may not be doing. Mm-hmm. Now, this I know firmly makes me sound like an old man, but to me, definitions matter.
They do matter. There's no question about it. And whether young guys coming up think that it sounds like an old curmudgeon yelling, get off my cloud or stay off my lawn, when they start working in the film industry alongside with music, they're going to find out in a hurry that they will probably get shunned.
I'm not sure about that, but it's one of those things that...
Oh, you get put in your place pretty quick in the film industry. There's no question about it.
Oh, if you're in the film industry, yes.
Well,
absolutely.
And if you're trying to work music in the film industry in that regard, you're going to get put in your place. Yeah, there's no question about that.
Right.
There's a hierarchy that exists, and you don't bust that hierarchy.
It would be nice to have a stronger music union, wouldn't it?
There's a pretty good one.
You actually had dinner with Phil from SSL the other day, and you were talking about different roles as engineers, how that changes. Another thing that gets misconstrued a lot, or certainly is evolving, is mastering, the term of mastering.
Well, that and the whole concept of audio engineer, which is an all-encompassing term, can relate to anybody under that umbrella. That includes recording engineer, audio editor, mixing engineer, mastering engineer. And technically speaking, there are specialists to the effect of vocal engineer that specialized just in dealing with vocals. And all of that falls under audio engineer. And as Phil and I were discussing some of these terminologies and things and where people are falling short and asking for audio engineers, the theory is that the reason why they do that, especially on social media, is to try and find somebody who says they can do it all. And when an artist is asking for this, they don't want to pay him. I need an audio engineer. 50 guys will raise their hand. And then it's like,
yeah, well, we can't pay you, but it'd be good on your resume.
Right.
Yeah.
It's great exposure. Yeah. I'm really killer at what I do.
Yeah. It's moving along from we'll call it the grandpa segment of the podcast here, the episode. When it comes to skill sets, now this would be a little bit less opinion-based, right? Mm-hmm. The industry in itself is always evolving. There are newer techniques that we should, in my opinion, keep up on, even if we're not solely focused on them. At the same time, we have to know where things came from and how to go about doing something. As an example, what I would call like newer skill sets, there was a transition when people had to learn how to use a DAW.
Yes.
When you were coming from strictly working on tape and then all of a sudden there's a computer in the recording studio. So what the hell is this, right? That's one of those leaps that seems so obvious today, but that is something that you have to learn a new skill set by actually learning a DAW.
Yes.
You know.
What was one of the things that you remember early on with DAWs that people used to bitch about?
Early on, the DAW that I used, I started on Cubase, and I'm really dating myself here, but it couldn't do audio at the time.
Well, that was the same for me. I started with Logic Notator. It couldn't do audio either.
Yeah, it was MIDI sequencing, right?
But that's not necessarily a DAW because that's not a digital audio workstation at that point.
Right.
Those were just sequencers, and Cubase was a sequencer. Logic was a sequencer.
Yeah.
That sort of thing. And you could make it play along with audio by using SMPTE timecode. Sure. Now, that's probably a terminology for a lot of young guys that doesn't make a lot of sense, but it is still a very, very used format when it comes to syncing anything with film is SMPTE timecode. And back in the day, you did a stripe of SMPTE timecode on your tape so that when you hit play on the tape machine, the sequencer would suddenly pick up and carry along and play along with it. If the tape varied a little bit, the sequencer varied along with it. That's how that worked, is SMPTE timecode. And moving to the point of digital audio and actually recording audio digitally. I can't remember the exact version. It might have been version 4 of Logic about that time. And eMagic at the time, who Logic was created by before Apple bought them, had an audio card, the eMagic audio card, and it was 44.1 14-bit audio. So it didn't even have 16-bit audio. It was 14-bit audio. The biggest thing, and the reason why I asked you that question, has a lot to do with that most people at the time, when they started recording digitally on a computer, the bitching moment was it has no warmth. But I remember
the audio quality.
The audio quality. But my retort on that at all times when I heard that as a means of being a problem was that digital is literally a mirror. And it shows you exactly what you gave it. And if you don't like what you're seeing in the mirror, the problem isn't the mirror, which in this case is the digital audio workstation, the DAW. It's what you feed the mirror. And if you didn't feed it what you wanted to hear, you didn't get it back. Now, things like that have kind of changed today. So,
yeah, I mean, all those imperfections and things that the people were used to hearing coming from tape or the console, and it adds subtle distortion or harmonics and stuff on its journey to landing on the tape and then back to our eardrums, right? Mm-hmm. We're adding those things back in.
Yes,
and that's
with the tape plugins and channel strips and things of that nature. It's getting back to that quality of the hardware. And that was an interesting distinction that Phil mentioned at dinner the other night, is that rather than calling a console and the controller a controller, he's calling everything now just hardware.
Yeah.
It's just hardware
Just as a
now.
blanket statement. Yeah.
It's a blanket statement. It's sort of like calling a producer the blanket statement of everybody doing everything because they produce whatever. The idea now is that it's not so much whether it's a console or it's a controller working a DAW. It's hardware. And it's that tactile hardware that gets things back to sounding human rather than drawing everything in perfectly, so to speak.
For me, the whole tactile thing is an emotional one for the person doing it, right? And
Sure.
it is one of those things where you're engaging with it in a different way. And I mean the music, right? You're engaging with the music and the sound because you're physically turning knobs so it becomes something a little bit more, well, physical, I guess, right? So you're kind of engaging in it. And that's something that I subscribe to. I mean, most of my time recording has been with a computer and a keyboard and a mouse.
Sure.
Right? But I like the idea of having a control surface and pushing faders, and even if it's just faders and pound pots, I like that. That's, I think, an important thing. But there again, you're sort of straddling two worlds, right? It's not black or white. It's both. It's gray, right? If we go into other techniques that are sort of like newer skill set that we take for granted today, but we have to sort of be forced, if you will, to learn, would be things like comping stuff. It used to be like, well, you do another overdub, right?
Yes.
But now it's like, no, let's do 10 tracks and we'll cut and paste whatever we want, right?
Well, and that's part of the thing of going from tape to the digital audio workstation. There's been a huge transition of that because obviously early on, DAWs didn't have this capability. It was a matter of doing another take until you got a take right, and then you could put it on a new track, so to speak, and you could leave it alone and just leave it. The idea back in the days of tape, and especially if you look at things like Queen and other guys that were working on 24-track tape, which you were limited to 24 tracks. That didn't mean that you could only do 24 tracks of audio. It just meant that at any given time, there was only 24 things playing. And what they would do is they would do overdubs, fill all the tape up on all the tracks, and then they would bounce that all down to a singular track and start again. And they got to a point where they did so many takes that they wore the tape out because the tape is a physical thing and it would wear out. You don't have that issue in DAWs. So performance copying is different in today's world where you don't have to worry about erasing previous parts and bouncing them down to singular or stereo tracks and taking up two channels and doing more and more and more overdubs. The overdubs now can just keep filling up tracks until you bring the computer to a halt for having too many tracks. And other things back then too, as well, is that time correction was nearly well, you couldn't really do it. You had to be a fucking good musician in order to have good timing on the days of tape. Because splicing and edit, I mean, you could splice and edit tape to make a more perfect timing take, but that's a whole skill set in and of itself that is no longer really around because who cuts tape anymore? It's transfer it to the DAW, cut it there, and put it back on tape.
Yeah. And the other things, cleaning up audios we've talked about here, like using RX or something, that's a new skill set. Do you need to know all of these things? Maybe not need is a strong word, but it's a good skill to have.
Sure.
Right? But what about things that are sort of fallen to the wayside? There's a long list here that we could do, and it would be very sort of contentious in some things that I don't intend to talk about, but maybe we'll mention them. The first thing that comes to mind for me is just the use of tape. Unless you're working in a studio that actually still uses tape, it's a skill that is fallen to the wayside.
To an extent, yes.
Because it's like, hey, Chris, go in and bias the tape.
Most people are like, what do you mean bias?
Exactly. So it's like all of these skill sets, and you're making like cutting tape and sitting there with actually razor blades and cutting and splicing together, all this kind of stuff. Today, it's like we don't even think about it because we do it with a few key commands, right?
Sure.
So
and the idea too on the tape plugins that you can get, whether it's from Universal Audio, Waves, or some other company that's making a tape emulation, they're pre-biased. You don't have to worry about the biasing of it because it never changes. It's at the right amount based on the format that you choose. Now, can you change it? some plugins, yes, you can. Like with the UA plugins, I know for a fact you can change the biasing to mess with it if you really wish to. And
Yeah.
it's akin
Yeah,
to working on a tape machine.
Yeah, it's the same thing with the Slate has like a high or low bias or just a normal bias. And it's nice to have that functionality there, I suppose, if you're experimenting. But at the same time, it's like, oh, I'm going to bias it one way or another. Or, I'll just add 1 dB bump at 4K. It's like there are different ways of going about it, I suppose. Lastly, I think we have this whole variety of skill sets that we should definitely know that are still prevalent, right? And this goes against the whole, I just want a quick plugin to do this, right? It comes down a little bit of personality, but more about that later. Like, for example, how to mic a drum kit.
It's a big deal.
Yeah, and you should
Especially
be
when
able
you have
to do
musicians that can actually play. It's better to go and mic that drum kit up, mic that guitar cabinet up, mic the bass up, go DI with it as well. Where to place mics in a room is a huge deal. I see people like, what mic should I get if I'm recording in my bedroom so that it sounds like so-and-so? Well, the answer to that is who knows until you know what mic sounds good with your voice. And two, if you're recording in your bedroom, you better know where to place the mic.
Yeah.
Because any mic can sound okay, but where you place it in the room might make it sound like absolute ass, or it might make it sound absolutely brilliant. It just is a matter of placement. And that's where guys like Al Schmidt, when he was around, they were brilliant at that.
It's a basic skill that we should all have, and it's not just a plug-in of whatever, the mic playserizer or something. Another thing that to a certain degree, I'm guilty of this, or at least I have been, learning how to dial up a sound on a synth. Goes back to things like the Mini Moog and a lot of the first sort of synthesizers where there were no presets. So you had to make the sound that you wanted,
Be creative.
what you heard in your head. Yeah, go ahead and do it. I think that is obviously, if you're a keyboard player, you should be doing this. This is not even a question. You should be able to dial up any kind of sound that you need. But to people like myself, I don't consider myself a keyboard player. I play some keyboards, but I'm not C.J. Vanston or somebody like that by any stretch of the imagination. I like to have at least a basic understanding of how to get a certain sound. I can therefore get more mileage, I think, out of any kind of instrument that I have. And this is the same thing for me. And this is the same for you as well. When you hear a guitar sound, that's a great guitar sound, you probably have a more or less immediate thought of like, this is how I would go about doing that. And getting, an appropriate amp and dialing in the tone that you need. So those are basic skills as opposed to getting one of these amps in and it's like one knob on it. And it's like just more or less, and you have this sort of perfect tone, right? I am of the personality that I like to know how the sausage is made, if you will.
Sure.
You got to kind of make it happen. So all of those things, I think you keep an eye on the future and kind of aware of new techniques and things, but learn how to do it the old-fashioned way as well, because it's only going to help you.
Yeah, I don't disagree. It's good to have a general knowledge of how recording used to work, as it still applies to digital in today's world. But then there are things that digital can do that tape really couldn't, and it's okay to push it as long as you know what you're doing to push it.
Yeah, it just adds more depth to your knowledge of what you're doing, and you know why you're doing certain things. Even if you're executing those things using plugins or whatever, you still know the mindset behind it and why a sound changes if you're moving your virtual guitar mic a couple of inches off the grill or whatever.
And there's a reason for doing it, and people need to understand it. And that's where you become a recording engineer that works with the microphones and placement rather than the mixing engineer trying to deal with that. That is the recording engineer's process right there.
Right.
Is understanding that. Another thing is it's just unrealistic to be a master at everything in terms of the recording process. And so many guys on social media, especially as they're coming up, they get a little bit of knowledge and suddenly they know everything and they're a master at everything that they do. And sure you are.
Yeah, it's only human, right? We can't know everything, and that's all right. But to have like a little bit of an understanding of where something is coming from, because, you know, there's going to be people out there that can do that task for you if you need it.
Yeah. And
right?
Guys that have been doing it day in and day out that you haven't. And the same thing even occurs in today's mixing environment that is evolving into things like Dolby Atmos and Sony 360RA. That's a different mixing skill set from standard stereo mixing. Can a standard stereo mixer do it? Sure. But they need to spend those hours working in this format. Otherwise, they might create boring versions of Atmos mixes or 360RA mixes compared to guys that are really being creative and understanding the process and doing it and have worked thousands of hours in it already.
And I think that's also one of those things that where, you know, I don't want to say the old guard, but people that have a lot of experience, they're now learning how to do this and doing mixes in surround or Atmos or whatever format they're doing it for as a way to stay current.
Sure.
Right? Because that's, you know, it's a new revenue stream for them, if you will, but also just want to keep working. It's interesting of like newer technologies coming out. Then again, at the flip side of that, right, we're back to checking like mono compatibility. Would have thought that 10 or 15 years ago, you know?
Yeah. So don't always assume that new is going to replace the old. And don't always assume that old is extremely always correct in every instance. It's definitely, if you apply the knowledge from previous generations into what's going on today, it certainly helps how things will come out tomorrow.
Absolutely.
And with that being said, let's move on to our Friday finds. Chris, what have you got this week?
Well, I got more of a PSA today than a piece of gear, actually, because when we're recording this, Apple have just released their latest OS, Sequoia. Things are showing up on social media like it always does. Is it safe to update yet? Oh, I've updated and now my plugins don't work. Mm-hmm. Don't update. If you have a working system, don't update yet. Give it 6 months if you're brave, right? Or if you want to be just completely masochistic to yourself, go ahead. Go for it. But I would encourage everybody to hold your horses a little bit until all the bugs are worked out, unless you really want to be a live beta tester with all your projects. And you probably don't, so don't update yet. What have you got, Jody?
I'm going with a plugin that has recently come out from Isotope known as Plasma. And Plasma is an intelligent saturation plugin. And being that you really like saturation yourself, as do I, it is a good idea to look at the Plasma plugin to help get additional harmonics and saturation within your instrumentation if you so desire.
I saw that. It looked cool. It reminds me of Chroma Glow that is now in Logic.
Yeah, Chroma
Glow. On Logic.
Very much. Yeah.
So seems really cool.
While we've got your attention, we ask that you go to InsideTheRecordingStudio.com and sign up for our mailing list. You'll need to be on our email list in order to be eligible for any future giveaways, and we'll make sure you don't miss any future episodes of this incredible podcast. Send us an email at goldstar, GOLDSTAR, at InsideTheRecordingStudio.com with the word technique, and you'll get something cool back in your inbox. If you have a topic or suggestion for us to explain in a future episode, contact us at the contact page and we'll put it into consideration for a future episode. With that, I'll say see you next week.
Thanks for listening, people. Talk to you later, Jody.